Okay, so yeah, thanks to everybody for coming to today's event as part of the project that me and Anna are doing called These Lancashire Women are Witches in Politics at the Turnpike. So I'm Helen and Anna is waving now. And we've been collaborating on a project at the Turnpike over the last year. So just before we start, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this event. So if you don't want to be on the recording, as I just said before, you can turn your camera off, your video off. We'd ask everybody to mute, which I think you all have done anyway, until we come to the question and answer, and then you can unmute if you want to ask Louise any questions, or as the performance is going on, you can ask questions in the chat as well. If there's things that like pop into your head that you want to capture, then you can pop them in the chat and we'll get to them after Louise's performances.
So just to give you a little bit of background about the project, some of you might already know it, but we'll just go through it anyway. This is a collaborative project, an interactive residency between me and Helen, which takes its initial inspiration from the history of the Leigh Female Reformers of 1819 and the monstrous representations of them in the media at the time. The Leigh Female Reformers sought parliamentary reform and to have a say in how the country was won through universal suffrage and MP representation. We focused a lot on the language that was used to put the women down, labelling them as monsters, medusas, and other pejorative phrases, and how these terms could be harnessed to express a type of power, and how almost these terms actually recognise that there's a power in these women as well. Drawing on this symbolism and elements of the reformers' activities, we're researching and developing work with the Leigh community and beyond, which weaves a new empowering language based on a shared history of place, myth, power, and witchcraft.
So tonight we have invited alt pop poet Louise Fazackerley to share a recorded performance of a section of poetry chosen to reflect the themes that mirror the life and actions of the Leigh Female Reformers of 1819. So Louise's contemporary lived observations of life and politics in a northern town speak across the centuries and evoke an atmosphere of place, of hardship, of conviviality, and of everyday magic. With work rooted in word-witchery and the working class, Louise explores the synergy between poetry and movement in a way that makes the ugly beautiful and the mundane fantastical. The winner of the BBC Radio 3 New Voices and European Slam finalist, Louise is the celebrated author of the Lolitas, a genre-distorting, darkly humorous, dystopian collection exploring the power of teenage girls and single mothers. So I just want to say all of this just to say hello to Louise.
Yeah.
Say hello.
Hi everyone. Hi Louise.
It feels like, you know, when you're talking of somebody and then you don't actually get them to speak, it seems a bit weird. So we're now going to show Louise's recorded performances. There's 5 poems and open up that question and answer after the poetry performances. So again, like I say, if you have any questions that pop into your head, pop them in the chat. Anna and I will start off the questions with some things that we want to draw attention to with the relationship between the project and Louise's work. But yeah, anything that pops into your head, then you can do that. Okay, Anna.
All right, so we will start.
Let's make a spell. Let's get dressed up on Tuesday afternoon while the kids are at school and everyone else is working. Let's dance in the rain. This is RSVP. I invite you to love. I invite you to love the rain. My childhood sat at an open door, awed as seaweed-skirted girls fall, land and lift in these perfect, imperfect circles. My book abandoned to watch this ballet in the backyard. Even now, I'm just shopping, and the rain slices through the everyday, and the hair rises at the base of my neck, and the pink flats of the tarmac at the precinct are puddled and so mapped with these white flats of trodden chewing gum. It's like a cityscape. It's like Venice to my bird's eye view. Let hoods fall. Let the streets become streams. Let's ride the waves and the call of woods and beck, where we will hop from slice of tire to broken paving stone, stick out a tip of tongue and taste smoke air, cloud falls, spit, and wear water, wear water, wear water as clothing, and later, as we room and warm indoors, a faint acid rain soundtrack plays. Pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter. I threw my book away, but mine's got a load of raindrops on the front. Let's move on. Why does a moth fly to the light? Why, when we stand on a platform and speak to a group of people, is there some sort of power? This is light catchers. Science still doesn't know the why of this simple thing. The earth turns, earthworms are repelled by light, but as all the sky falls, it's night. Makeshift, backlit stage, I'm honey, suckle, fed, awake, compelled to stumble through damp, to seek a white sheet, pegged to a washing line in the woods. Wings thrown upwards, awkward as elbows, like a raincoat flaps and flails, a landing of head torches, a slow moving constellation of readers and watchers and lepidopterists, sovum, larvae, adults, wretched things. I walk my anxious walk round, 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 one eye more open than the other. The bell jar, the pen, the pin. I'm trying to see the pheromones failing to fill in the space between raindrops, still trying to find an angle of flight to the moon. I'll tell you a little story before I do my next poem. Have you heard of Sulis? She's a goddess. She's not Zool, not the one from Ghostbusters. Sulis was like a Roman goddess, the goddess of wisdom and the arts. And before that, she was a Celt goddess, worshipped as a goddess of fertility. In those times, they would write these curse tablets, to try and get some justice when human means wouldn't fail, and they had to call to the gods. And those curse tablets reminded me a little bit of the profiles you see on online dating. I hope your penis hurts when you do it. That's what it said on one of the curse tablets from Roman times. I've not made that up. I don't like you if you have a trout pout, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I wrote this poem called Beta Male, not Alpha Male, Beta Male. Beta Male. Hurts like pencil shavings. See the lonely suit men. They've been nipped by bitter Mrs. English teacher. Like Sulis, I burn for them. The stars have fucked them over. I'm so terribly cold, he says. They seek the sun within a 20-mile radius. Suit lonely. The shavings curse socks in bed. Pencil light hearts, wagging tails. and married men live longer lives. Perhaps it just seems longer, he says. And I'm so goddess, so in heat, heathen hot. He seeks second-hand walks and long adoration in Bath. Thank you. It's a love potion, a little poem.
Oh.
Witch and her familiar, got a cat in the background. Now for something a little bit more political, this is Nothing Town. It's rollers in Primark, hashtag cute onesies, uptown, is it Saturday? Proles, they're nailing us down, and it's nothing but skin, and it's nothing but tight, and it's nothing but nooses in the woods in the night. So we shoot up Sambuca, remember Diamond White, ride the Christmas whiskey turkeys, cause everything's all right. What's your poison, love? And we're back to bathtub gin, and we're foaming in Prosecco, and we cannot feel a thing. And it's nightclubs in a nothing town. It's nightclubs in a nothing town, and it's nothing but girls, and it's nothing but lads, and it's single mums and weekend dads, and it's nothing but Tinder, and it's nothing but Grinder, and it's slut drops in Bentleys. You make grinds behind you, and it's nothing but grime, and it's fucking sublime, and it's nothing but workers off call centre time, and it's nothing but 80s and 90s and noughties, fat girls in their teens, bald men in their 40s, and it's nothing but human, and it's nothing but a skate. If I took a few stills, this could hang in the tape, and this is working class culture, baby. It's nightclubs in a nothing town, and it's 4 a.m. chips and icicle nips. I could have my coat on him. Do you think he's fit? And chili sauce, dresses and C-scale hips, and a few pools of sick that we judge as we skip. And it's nothing but sticky, and it's nothing but nice, and it's nothing but tacky, and the homeless on spice, and it's nothing but tender strangers at the ATM sharing some backy at the end of the night. And it's nightclubs in a nothing town, and it's not making waves and the sink of the Stella. It's the Daily Mail shocker as the kid stabs a fella, and nothing is left and everything is wrong, but just keep on drinking and forget riot songs. And it's nothing but beak, and it's nothing but bite, and it's nothing fake news and the rise of the right. And it's nothing but light, and it's nothing but love, and it's nothing but pigeons rising as doves, and it's nothing but Tommies, and it's nothing but bait sharks in t-shirts saying, isn't capitalism great? And it's nothing but, and it's nothing but, and it's nothing but lubricating the machine, and it's nothing but, and it's nothing but living the conservative dream. This last poem for you, I wrote after I did this Where Poets Meet Scientists, and I met a young engineer actually from London, a young Muslim woman, like a black young woman, a very clever little bean, and together we thought about this. It's called The Rules, aka The Facts. Just as T comes before Q, just as P's come before Q's, just as the white ball comes before the black ball, just as white comes before black, just as male comes before female, just as female comes before she-male, just as same comes before other, just as married comes before single mother, just as rich comes before poor, just as WN1 comes before WN4, just as misery comes before crack, just as fortune comes before frack, just as about any other religion comes before Islam, at least in the eyes of the Western media, just as greed comes before greedier, just as haves come before have-nots, just as eyes come without being bloodshot or blind, just as cruel comes before kind, just as I come before you, just as fossil comes before fuel, just as public schools come before those who rule, just as white comes before black, just as fiction comes before fact, just as thought comes before act, just as make comes before mend, just as bend comes before break. Make the rules, break the rules, make the rules. Thank you.
I want to just do you can unmute and do that.
Did we lose one poem?
No, we didn't. You beat a male, then goes on to Nothing Time, but it looked like it did.
Yeah, I was like, oh. Amazing. Thank you so much, Louise, for giving us those performances.
Amazing.
Thank you. I was, it feels like a long time ago that I recorded them, and I was like, oh, I look quite fit on some of them. Oh, these are quite good. I was surprised.
We've got some lovely, we've got some comments coming through as well, saying it's brilliant. It was ace. Nothing Time gave me chills. It gives me chills as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, really, Brill. Yeah, there's so much in all of them, and I think one of the first things that we wanted to ask you, and it's not something that we've not had a chance to actually like chat to you, which is really nice that we can do it all together, but we wanted to ask you what was the decision process, because we came to you and said, you know, we're doing this project and we'd really love to for you to find some poems that reflect some of these themes. How did you decide on the poems that you chose to give to us?
Well, knowing a little bit about the project that you're doing, I was thinking, first of all, like, how am I political? So I was thinking, which of my poems reflect being political? And I think sometimes I'm political with a small p, like socio-political, in that I tell stories often of people who may not get heard, but then maybe the poems that I recorded for you, the second two, the list poems, are more overtly political, and kind of that there's a message. They talk about diversity and like how the world's not fair, and they talk about how booze is great, but is also can kind of like be part of a network of things that subdue people and kind of numb the pain, rather than trying to get rid of the source of the pain. You're kind of dealing with the symptoms rather than the disease, which is, I feel like, the government. So I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking about, how am I a witch? And I use the word-witchery sometimes to describe my work, partly because I think it sounds cool. Like, what sort of fictional things exist to describe women? Well, I'm not a princess. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like a princess. That doesn't kind of appeal to me in the kind of world of folklore. But then all the stuff to do with witches and how witches actually grow old and become more powerful, that feels like, oh yeah, I'd rather tap into that. So I was thinking, what things do I have that feel like spells? And then because your project is about reformers, I was thinking about what things do I have that is persuasive in some way. So I suppose that's what I was thinking about when I was looking at what do I have that exist. And I'll not keep on going because I know you need to speak too, but I also was thinking about, because I know that in the reformers, they were referred to in these mythological terms. I was thinking, do I have any pieces that feel like they're referring to other worlds? And I suppose the direct reference to that was when I talk about Sulis in that kind of dating poem. So that's what I was thinking.
Oh, I love that. I totally agree with you as well. Like, you know, you watch like fairy tales and things like that, and you're like, yeah, the sort of wicked witch, or the baddie and you know, there's so much more interesting characters.
Yeah, they've got the power and the juicy story plot, haven't they? They're not
the best outfits as well.
And I feel like the dating one, I'm going like, I'm hot, I'm heathen. And like, I know in rap you get a lot of sort of like males bigging themselves up. Like, that's probably the only poem I've got where I'm not being self-deprecating. But you can do that a little bit through a cipher of being this idea of this witch. I don't know.
I really love that as well when you say that, because I think there's something that's really like when we talk about witch and like being like transgressive and like, you know, not being conformist, and that idea of sexuality is like such a thing, you know. You're not meant to say that you're hot and you're ready and all of those things. You're not meant to talk about things like that as a woman.
But you're meant to be it, but you're not meant to talk about it. It's like, you're not allowed to mention it.
Exactly, or own it in any way. And I think I really love that bit in it, because there's a lot of power in that, isn't there? There's a lot of power. I can imagine there's a lot of power in saying those words and performing those words as well.
Hannah's just mentioned as well that the witch is an inversion of the modern obsession with youth and beauty, a celebration of aging disgracefully. I would just note that I don't think it's even a modern obsession with youth and beauty. I think that's, you know, age old, really. The kind of like, as soon as you kind of get beyond sort of like breeding age, you know, like a society seems to want to kick women out for a long time.
Hence the witch.
Yeah.
But I think for me, your poems are really political. And the two that you showed, obviously, like, were really hitting that. And I know people have said about the Not in Town giving them chills and wanting to hear it again. Reminds me of my hometown, I can't help, obviously I'm hearing it with the reformers in mind, but it does really remind me of that kind of, you talk about, I can't remember the words, but like people are in call centres and it's like he cogs in the machine, that the thing is happening. And if you think of like the reformers at that time of like massive industrial change, and they literally are cogs in that machine.
Yeah, they're just kind of becoming massively cog-like. They're kind of like, they're butting against the beginning of that cog mechanism. So we're like 200 years into it or whatever, but they were like just at the start of it, just realizing that their lives were kind of being more controlled, their time was being more controlled, there was more kind of like pressure on them in terms of work. So
the poem, that Nothing Down poem, is heavily influenced by John Cooper Clarke's Chicken Town in terms of like the punk poetry, which was a DIY poetry of revolution and very much a working class scene. So in part, it's kind of a response to that. And also like, when something's a chant, you know, and it's like the structure of it is list-like and repetitive, it's a lot more accessible for a lot more people. And also I feel like it has some almost like a power, like an incantation. Yeah. I'm not thinking that when I'm writing it, if I'm honest. I'm not thinking, oh, it feels like an incantation. But when I'm thinking about it in the context of witchery and the political and incitement or encouragement, I think repetition is kind of important.
Do you get that sensation when you're actually performing it, though, that it sort of feels incanty? Is that even a word? But it feels like you're giving an incantation. Like, do you kind of like go with it? Because obviously this, when you're giving an incantation, it's almost like you go beyond yourself, don't you? Kind of like, oh, do you like?
Whenever you're performing stuff that is from memory, there is a sense of channeling some otherness. Mm-hmm. There is a sense of that there's like anyone who's acted or anything, or it's like multiple consciousnesses. So like you've got the bit that's saying the words and speaking, and then you've got the other bit of the brain going, they're not listening at the back. You need to be louder here. You could try your voice a different way. So you've kind of got two voices going on in your head, the kind of stream. And I always imagine like if you're like an oracle and you were streaming like, you know, like gods and stuff, there's a sense of something coming through you. I mean, it's your own words, what you've memorized, but then there's another bit of your brain, like with an eye on the crowd. And so that does feel like an incantation in a way, like, because you're operating on different streams of consciousness, really.
You're like an oracle in that sense, it feels like. You're like, yeah. the kind of like, were they like Roman or Greek oracles, like the people would go and speak to, and they would kind of like speak these words that have come through them.
It's a weird thing as well, because you've written the words yourself, so it's not like it's come from any, but sometimes when you've written stuff, you write it and you leave it and you come back to it and you go, oh, has that come out of my brain? And actually all your brain is a little sponge for everything you see and hear and read. So that's all it is. You're just picking little fragments of all these different things and then like joining them together into this poem.
I'm just going to bring in Rowena's question. She said she really likes Nothing Town, and the poem about online dating was also really great. I wonder how else is a poem like a spell? Can you explain how you got into writing poetry and why?
So the poetry thing, I primarily got into it because I found it easy. So through education, it would feel like an easy way to do a module in my degree. So I didn't get into it thinking that I was going into this higher purpose and that it would be a vocation or a career at the end of the day. I wasn't thinking those things. But then when I had I had 2 children very close together, like 16 months apart. And I realised when I had those children that I then had an emotional need to express myself and to reflect the world around me. And I saw a poet called Mike Garry perform at Wigan Literature Festival where I was like volunteering, and he was making the ugly beautiful and writing about the streets. And I sort of strongly felt like, oh, I can do this. I can also reflect the world around me and share my stories and think stories of the people I meet and see, and that is entirely deserving and deserves to be out there. So that was kind of how I got into writing poetry. And then a bit later on, I realised that you could get £350 for a day in a school. So I thought, oh, that's some people's weekly wage. I wouldn't mind aiming towards that. And then obviously it's not quite like that because you don't get one every week, do you? But you know, like so it's partly an emotional feeling and a feeling of wanting to make an imprint on the world, and it's partly a practical feeling that actually this is a viable career. I just never realised it because I never knew a writer before.
It's good to hear that. Sorry to interrupt, but it's good to hear that, like for people to hear that as well. And like I know you do things with young kids, but like for them to hear that's possible, because you don't, like, I would never think, well, I never thought an artist was either, but it's that same sort of thing where you just kind of go, well, that's like a fictional thing. That's like a fairy tale story. It's not something that people can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I love that when I work in schools, and I do a lot of work in schools because I love children. I like people really, so I do a lot of work in all ages. I just like people, but with like the smaller ones, I'm like saying like who's the next writer in this class? Who's going to be the next teacher? You know, like because like you've got to drop the seeds, don't you? Like when I was at primary school, my head teacher, he was very supportive of me, and he was like, "Oh, you're going to go to university." And I was a bit like, oh, am I? All right. I trust your judgment, Mr. Forder. So it was kind of like something to aim for, like, because otherwise I wouldn't necessarily have been in my head. And I remember thinking when I did my GCSEs, if I fail them, I'll just go in the army. You know, that was kind of my, either I'll not fail them and go do A-levels and go to uni, or I'll fail them and then I'll go in the army. That was my kind of my breadth of experience.
How different things could have been.
Yeah.
And I've been shooting today with my daughter, actually. Good. I've got 3
anyway. But maybe a second career.
Shall I ask one of our questions just to bring it in? So we've kind of talked a little bit about the reclaiming the witchery thing. So we had a question that's about how we've been looking obviously at mythological language and symbolism to describe the reformers, and you obviously talked about Sulis, the goddess of wisdom and arts. But we wondered how important do you think mythological language is in telling stories and to understand what's happening, and how relevant do you think Greek and Roman myths are today? Like, just going to kind of like just clarify that as well, because it's kind of interesting, because we're on the one hand we're kind of reclaiming this language, and then in a sense that seems as though we're saying it was awful that these women were called this stuff, but then it's interesting also that it's so important for people to create sort of metaphors to understand the world. So it's awful that these women were called these particular terms and we're trying to reclaim it, we're trying to understand, like, I don't know, why does anyone need to kind of like create these metaphors or symbols for other people to understand the world?
Well, I think part of it is when you're writing, you can reference song lyrics, or you can reference TV programs, or you can reference anything in popular or past culture to add extra meaning to your work in a shorthand way. And for example, when I'm referencing Sulis, I'm kind of tapping in really to like a richer echelon of language. And when I mean rich, I mean kind of rich in the kind of literal sense, like upper class, because in private education, studying the classics, studying Latin and Greek, studying classical stories is kind of like an earmark of knowledge. It's almost like a code. So if you know that sort of language and you can reference it, then you're kind of making yourself appear learned and clever and saying I am equal. So part of it, like if you can reference mythology, is kind of about elevating yourself. And obviously as a very broad accented working class woman living in a rough area, that anything I can do to kind of to say I'm clever, like I'll tap into is kind of important. So it's got power in that way. But then in a more organic way, it's powerful because when we write in symbolic terms, we are giving the power to the reader. So as a writer, you create a little bit of meaning, but actually the reader is the person bringing the meaning to the text. So if you use like an allegory of like a maze, everyone's personal maze will be different. If you talk about battling a monster, everyone's personal monster will be different. So you're actually allowing people to access their own lives by using a metaphor. So that's actually a really powerful thing. And more people will connect with your work because they think, oh, when she's writing about, I don't know, writing about the rain, and loving the rain, really she's writing about tears, or really she's writing about hardship, or really she's just writing about actually physically raining. But do you know what I mean? Like there's some power because it gives the power back to the person listening.
Love that explanation.
Yeah,
that's kind of,
you fixed that for us.
but it has made me so happy as well, just like how I've never sort of thought about it that way and understood it that way, but you do the images that you create in my mind and my images, and I've never thought about them as my images. You've just kind of like allowed me to sort of tap into those things that are personal to me, and that is really it's a powerful kind of gift, isn't it? I love that. But I think
passing kind of like sort of kind of ethereal objects to each other, you know, like they're kind of like artworks, but they're just kind of like in the mind.
And the idea that
we have a vase and then you just go boom.
Yeah, we're all sharing our own sort of personal visions of that. I think with the mythological things, it's really interesting because you kind of, the way you described that is really, I think, kind of true of the Reformers as well. Like they were tapping into that language that wasn't necessarily their own language. Like a lot of this language was like These Lancashire Women are Witches in Politics. Even just that is like from like court documents. I'm rubbish at
yeah, I mean, Yvonne is, I think Yvonne says so, she'll remember, but I think it was a kind of a guy who'd been sent to report back to the government on what was happening. So he was kind of like, so it was like a kind of governmental document, but it was like a kind of spy person.
So it's like this like elite language, like you say. It was the language that they could understand between each other, and not necessarily witches so much, but like there's lots of different terms that they use that like relate to those kinds of myths that like people might have had some understanding of on a day-to-day basis, but not, it is still that elite language. It's still that kind of so I think, yeah, it's interesting what you say about how you use it and how that kind of elevates something, and the way that the Reformers kind of appropriated their symbols was about like legitimizing their cause. It's kind of got a similarity really, isn't it?
It kind of feels as well. Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say that the Reformers also kind of use physical, like laurel wreaths and laurel sticks, which is kind of like this ancient Roman kind of like powerful symbol, but also a symbol of peace or whatever. But they kind of like, you know, they were brandishing that type of symbolism to kind of like give their cause meaning, additional meaning, representation within it, with, you know, beyond just having like a banner that had a slogan on it. They had these objects that had this ancient meaning to them that they were carrying to sort of show who they were.
Because that's what, when I've been to your workshops or the art workshops, that we were learning about how the tassels are like military dress, and the tassels, like the making of tassels ties into, basically it's like putting on your suit to go to work, isn't it? You're pretending to be what they are in order to fit in, or in order to generate power to yourself, you know, to dress up as somebody powerful, because those objects have meaning. So I think it's a similar sort of thing with language.
It's like dress is the job you want.
Yeah.
Not that they wanted to be in the military, but you know.
Taking over the world.
I'm just going to double check if we've got any questions. Do you want to ask the next one, Helen, whilst I just have a look what we've got?
I was going to say there's a few comments as well. I'd like to sort of ask a couple of these, because we talked a little bit about performance, and I think some people have asked some nice questions about saying, like, does the rhythm of the poem come first, or do you have sentences that you weave together?
Nice use of the word weave.
So my writing practice tends to be that I pick something I want to write about, and then I write like it's prose, you know, like there's no short lines or anything. And then as I'm writing, sometimes rhythmic things happen, and sometimes rhyming things happen. They just come out my brain and accidentally. And then when you come to edit, then you add on extra rhythmic and extra rhyme and extra literary devices in order to make it seem fun for the ear, because it is an oral form, an oral tradition, spoken word. So, and I work largely in performance, so I'm largely thinking about what will sound good and hold an audience attention. However, one of the beautiful things about being able to send the poems for the art installation, because I was imagining they'd be in the gallery and people would walk past and they might put their earphones on and listen, or they might not bother and just look at them. It was nice. It's nice that the video is a great form in order to have a little bit of performance element with faces and voice, but also to get the words as well, so that you get both elements of it. So that's quite exciting for me. I can't remember what the question was. What was the question again?
It was about, I think you've answered it though. It was about like the two things, like, do they sit
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and somebody else has said something which, like, relating to your performance as well. When you perform, Louise, it feels like you are taking us to another place, using your words and movements to change how we feel, which is surely what a spell is. Love that. What has influenced this style, which is so uniquely yours, that energy of otherworldliness?
I don't think of myself as being otherworldly, but sometimes when I watch myself perform, like on the video, I feel a little bit like, you know, when you watch a medium and like, and the spirit comes in the body, and there's some, it's kind of it's not really me, it's a version of myself that doesn't really exist inside myself. It only exists when you watch it from the outside. But in terms of influencing my style, I used to do a lot of contemporary dance. I only started it really when I got to college, so I only came across it later, and that informs my performance, because for whatever reason, when I'm learning things, having an action helps me learn the words, but also feels more natural to me. I don't know, it feels like more freeing, it feels better, I feel happier doing it when I'm moving as well. So I think studying a lot of contemporary dance, like from age of, like, say, 16 up to 21, has heavily influenced. And also, like, I was always a very sporty child. I was a climber, I did sports, I excelled at sports. So the body and actions are an integral part of my being, and I feel like I can see how that feels spell-like, you know, like if you had to like walk around something 3 times, like there's kind of the element of learning stuff and hearing stuff, the element of feeling stuff emotionally, and the physical act of doing stuff. Those three things entwined are kind of part of the creative process, because when you're writing, you're tapping into your feelings, and your feelings are part of your physicality. So to me, it seems only right that that would then do what I do when I do my poems.
Yeah, it's, you can see it. It's like the whole thing is just right. Like, you couldn't take one thing from it. I couldn't imagine, in a way, I couldn't imagine just hearing you perform. Like, it is a visual thing as well, and it kind of, I don't know whether you want to ask that question, Anna, because it kind of taps into the light catchers question about performance.
Of our questions, or the question, yeah. So at the beginning of Light Catchers, when we stand on a platform and we speak to a group of people, is there some sort of power? We're thinking about performances of power and sounds and movements, as in like the pageantry, the presentations. So we're actually kind of planning to do a kind of pageant performance where we're kind of going to get people to reclaim their voices, but to not specifically say anything. So we're going to probably go down the route of like monster cries and animal noises, and sort of like, just really get people to state their presence and hold their presence. But we wonder whether or not you had any advice for us about performing power on a platform.
So I feel like when you perform, like when you do performance studies and stuff, you understand that when a person is live and physically in front of you, they've got a full performance text to look at. So they're not just, it's you, the sound, the physicality, and it's how you interrelate with your environment and your people. So like, it can be accent, or it can be charisma, or lack of it, chiastima. It can be clothing, how we dress the part. It can be stature, and how we interact in real time with any hecklers, any other people about, all this sort of thing when we're thinking about being persuasive or likable or followable as a leader, when you think about protests, the audience are all making up their minds. Do we like this person? Do we trust this person? Will we follow this person? So I feel like they're all the personality, they're all the intangible things that kind of make someone important in the world of protests, because I feel like that's what we're talking about, or powerful. And so there's that. What else I think about that? Oh yeah, I was thinking about how if you're going to host some sort of event, it's a bit like a festival in a way, when I was talking about the idea of learning something and feelings and being in the body. That's the way kind of like good protests kind of work, isn't it? Like, you might have some drumming, and drumming directly affects the feeling in the body. It's not an emotional feeling as such, although it can connect to it. And then you've got persuasive speakers where you learn something through and can incite feeling. And then you can have like music and stuff, where music incites feeling, both emotional and in the body. So I just feel like thinking about it in those three kind of planes is useful if you want to essentially manipulate people. Like, it's a form of manipulation, but I'm not saying it's negative, doesn't it? And it's a form of reaching out to people and having an shared experience and community feeling. So I suppose that's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, that shared
connected to you.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? That shared thing. And I think it's like that tapping into a feeling and an emotion that is quite, we need to work on that, Anna.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, on the one hand, because we kind of want this element of almost the regimen of the sort of slightly militaristic formation that the reformers had learned to sort of walk, to seem orderly and to seem controlled and not like a rabble. So I know what we want to kind of harness that, but then it needs to not be so cold and foreboding that it's like you kind of like an overtaking of the square.
Well, like in poetry terms, there's something called a call and response, and you hear it in like hip hop and stuff, and it's like an African form of producing poetry in some setting where, you know, when I say king, you say Kong, king, Kong, king, Kong. You know, the act of physically chanting and a call and then a learned response is a very powerful thing. The act of chanting, you know, like Boris Johnson's a wanker. You know, like when my daughter came home from protesting the other week when she went to Manchester for the, you know, the protest bill. She came home and I was like, what did you do? And she was like, oh, I listened to some speakers and did a lot of chanting. What did you chant? And it was nice to hear what she was chanting, because chanting and poetry and incantation and protest, that repetitive and rhythmic words, they all go together.
I think that's really helpful to us. I know we're not going to be using language and words, but I think like thinking about incantation and thinking about
call and response is nice.
Response, definitely, yeah. For anybody who's going to come down, be prepared to roar.
Or like twit to woo. That's like the only one I could think of a call and response animal, but yeah.
we can do that. There's just some lovely comments here. We've got I think I feel like we've talked about so many different ways, so it's difficult to remember what we were talking about. But Helen is saying the hyperlocal connecting to the universal, which I really like, and know we've talked about before. And how do the concepts witch and working class go together? Interesting how both are marginalised.
Well, can I speak about that? Because the beauty of a witch is that it transcends class. So you can be a witch in any class, and it's not it's them and us. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think that is something quite special. And actually, a witch is about being powerful. And when we're talking about being sexy, power is sexy, and knowledge is sexy. So like when I think about like part of my family were travellers. So when I think about my great-grandma who's a traveller who settled, and she used to make medicine and birth the local children, I'm thinking she had that power of the witch in that sense, like call for Mary and she will come and help birth your children, she'll make you some medicine, and that's quite special. But like in the suffragette movement, where there were like quite well-born women who were seeking the vote and seeking to harness the power of working class women. That happened a lot in Preston. So I feel like a witch isn't necessarily working class. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's good. That's great.
Yeah, a way of like kind of, a way of like leveling kind of women in a way.
Yeah.
There's just following on from that, I think this is a really interesting thing somebody's said. I write poetry about being childless, not by choice. Jodie Day, who founded an online community for women like me, is doing some really interesting work around aging without children. She calls herself an apprentice crone. There's obviously a link between witches and childless women, or women who don't need to mother their children anymore, similar to the mad old cat lady trope. A woman who has a lot of time and agency is or was a direct threat to certain men, so they were othered. If you'd like to know more, this is really interesting chat between Jodie and other crones. So there's a link there. I'm definitely hitting that up because I have similar links that I've been interested by as well with that. So that's really good.
And I think like there is a definite truth in that. Like I've always been in uncomfortable relationships, with men, so the fact of being a single mother and in and out of relationships does give me more time than some of my friends who are in quite traditional family units and are happy and are raising the children. But for some, I feel like just the precious time. If my children go to the dads for 2 nights, they don't want them all, but if they, when they do, then that's precious time to get back. That women in traditional family units don't get the same. They don't get the same, and it's like it's hard work when you don't get any time to yourself.
Interesting. Yes, and we've got it really does look like you're holding and channeling the words with your movements. Very powerful. It's like the body in it all is an important thing. I love this.
I also like Dominic's comment, Twitter raw. That's really good.
We've got time for one more question. And we were talking about this in relation to there's two questions though.
Yeah, I'd quite like to do the urban space one. But
Yeah, let's do that. So there is a crossover with our work and in how you inhabit a space and how you reflect the world around you, expressing a new relationship to everyday public spaces. So what does your environment mean to you? Like, how do you feel the history of a place? Is there an energy or a story in the stones, bricks and landscape that you draw from?
Can you hear my cat meowing in the background?
Oh yeah, just.
All right, wait a minute. Kenny, there's some food in cupboard. She wants food. If not, just chuck her out. Okay. So in terms of the landscape and bricks and mortar, I've been recently doing a project called Wild Calligraphy where I've been working with an artist called Brian Whitmore, who is very interested in Zen and feeling nature and being very still. And being outside, and I love being outside to write work. I find site-specific work for me is awesome because when I go outside, one, you're seeing things, and so you can see things and turn them into metaphors, and that's my bestest thing about poetry. I like making metaphors and images. But the reason I've mentioned Wild Calligraphy is that because it's been site-specific and we've been going to 18 different places, there's been, in some places, I've very much felt like the ghosts of people have gone before are in the land. So when I've been learning about the history of the land, I felt the need to put that into the poetry. So, for example, when I went to Hay Hall, which is like a posh place with land and that, there was tumble down buildings, and I was thinking about climate change and how everything that humans build crumbles and nature starts to overcome the buildings and like even the old mining shafts that have been filled in and become flashes for nature, that there is something powerful in looking at what man has done or humankind has done as part of nature, because we are still part of nature. We're just a different sort of nature, and then how other bits of nature reclaim that. So I think that's quite interesting in looking at that big picture in terms of climate, but then also in terms of the ghosts of people who have gone before. So like, it's exciting to me in your project that you're talking about the Leigh Women as reformers, and you're talking about groups of women who are integral in making political change. Yes, we've heard about the suffragettes. Yes, we've heard about, sitting in the spot in the bus. Do you know what I mean? And these are important, but the more I hear, the more it is inspirational. I think, what am I doing? Because I do have a bit of time now. Do you know what I mean? I've not got a lot of barriers in terms of protest and stuff. So what am I doing to make the world a better place? Yeah, it's like my world speech, isn't it?
And it's a link as well, isn't it? It's when you sort of hear about people in your area, people from down the road, and people that you can relate to in some respects, that it actually makes it a bit more real and a little bit more like you have got agency within that, and you can do something about things, or at least try.
Well, when I first got into poetry, I went to open mic nights, and I thought, if they can do that, so can I. And I've got like a strong network of other like working class female poets, like Toria's on watching, she's an awesome poet, and Carla's on watching, she's beginning a poetic journey. And to have a group of people who feel like you, it feels like together you're stronger than you are apart. So that there is definitely something to do with that. Like, well, if they could do it then, and they didn't even have washing machines, why can I not do it now? What is my, like, the opium or booze of the time? What, or religion of the time? What is oppressing me? Is it spending too much time on the internet and saying, oh yeah, I agree, I'll totally sign this petition? And how much power does that really have?
Really interesting. Yeah, it's true. I think, like, I know me and Anna have talked a lot, and this is something that, Anna, you might want to talk about like inhabiting a place and like who's stepped on those on that sort of that stone or whatever it is before you, and like locating our project on where that the Leigh Reformers met. has been really important to us in this, and like you say about the people that have gone before in that landscape or in that environment.
I mean, I think it's really amazing when you see like an old stone step or something and it's really worn down in the dip, and you just think about all the people who've passed over that step that's worn and worn and worn it down. And there's just something really beautiful when we're standing by the obelisk, when we've been in Leigh, and you kind of like you can obviously touch the obelisk. I'm not saying that the reformers went around touching the obelisk, but it's just that you're kind of standing by a very an object that is an object that they stood by and spoke at. And it's like, it's not really kind of almost about being almost from the area. It's just that you're standing on that ground. So it doesn't matter where you're from. When you stand on the ground, you get that kind of like, to me, it feels like an electric pulse of energy from past. And you can get it anywhere. Like, you can go and stand in a town in Scotland and you hear that something happened in this location. And sometimes it's quite fun, I think, when there's nothing there. Like you go and stand in like in the middle of a shopping centre, but won't believe that shopping centre was like some great act happened. I mean, it's a bit like with the Peterloo stuff when people were standing by the Obelisk or whatever, and you know what I mean, it's like, like Petersfield's gone now, but it's like you're kind of in the location, so there's a vibe, there's a ghost of something that's happened there, and anyone who can stand there can, or sit there or whatever, can feel that, it's kind of, there's something, is it like psychogeography or something? But
it is. Yeah, I think it is. I think Gemma's nodding and she's my psychogeography person. But I think that is, and I think, there's something really powerful about that, and that's why we're really excited to bring it back to that square as well and be able to do something there.
In the Zoom channels. Well, it's just gone past 7, so shall wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just say, someone said, Rowena said, this event has been amazing. I feel so inspired and connected to a lovely community of witches and poets. It was so informative too. Thank you so much to Louise and the organisers. Definitely going to write some poems outside now and perform it with the body.
Amazing. Yeah. Get going. Do that.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Louise, for performing those and recording them so well. Like, I love them as performances. They're just so great. And for being here tonight and answering all our questions.
Oh, thank you for coming and listening to me rabbit on. It's just nice to see like other strong women in the room. Like, I know quite a few people and love people and like new friends. And I just I'm glad that we're getting the opportunity to get together online and hopefully, in physically, maybe in the future.
Yeah, join us on the square.
Yes.
Come and touch the obelisk and then wash your hands.
Yeah, so I'm going to say to Hannah, could you save this chat as well, because there's some good links in there as well. But yeah, if anybody wants to follow our project who isn't already, if you go onto the Turnpike website, there's a link there to our work and what we've been doing with people and all sorts of different things. And there's more YouTube events that we've run. This is the last one, unfortunately, which feels really sad, but we've had some brilliant performers and historians, and they're all available to view again on YouTube.
So if you've got a spare minute, check them out and do whatever you're doing while they're on in the background. They're really nice, interesting stuff.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming, and we're going to leave you now.
Yeah.